Our meditation today, based on Exodus chapter 20, is called The Ten Commandments, Guide to Living in Community as a Covenant People. Our series of meditation following the journey of the Israelites have so far taken us to the episode in Rephidim, where Yahweh provided His people with water from the rock. In our text today, we find the Israelites exactly 3 months after they left Egypt, marching into the desert of Sinai, where they held camp in front of a mountain. Here in the desert of Sinai, the Israelites will experience a defining moment by entering into a covenant relationship with Yahweh. Summoned by Yahweh, Moses went up the mountain, alone at first, to be joined by his brother Aaron later. Moses will serve as a messenger between Yahweh and his people, the Israelites. Up in the mountain, Yahweh told Moses to tell the people that God was offering them a deal based on what they witnessed, the things that Yahweh did in Egypt, parting the Red Sea, the defeat of the army of Pharaoh, that if they were willing to obey Yahweh fully and keep the terms of the deal, then out of all the nations, they will be Yahweh's treasured possession, a kingdom of priests for Yahweh, and a holy nation. It was an initiative being proposed to the people by a proven powerful God. The people can take or leave it. Our story says, the people readily agreed. They will do as Yahweh had spoken. It's a deal, Moses reported back to God. Now the deal has to be ratified. For 3 days, the people prepared to meet their awesome God. They came out of their tents to meet with Yahweh to formalize the deal. Yahweh came down from the mountain to meet with the Israelites, making His presence felt. All of a sudden, there was thunder and lightning, and the smoke-covered mountain trembled violently. There was even terrifying trumpet blast that got louder and louder. The Lord was making His presence felt, descending from the mountain to fetch His servant Moses. Then up in the mountain, in the hearing of the people, Yahweh spoke to Moses the preamble of the covenant they were about to enter into. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourselves an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or in the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. For the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses His name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. The story says, when all the people witnessed the thunder and the lightning, the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, they were afraid and trembled and stood at a distance, and said to Moses, You speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, or we will die. Moses said to the people, Do not be afraid, for God has come only to test you and to put the fear of Him upon you, so that you do not sin. Of course, what Moses and the people heard is what we know today as the Ten Commandments, known to biblical scholars as the Decalogue. Our question for meditation today, what is the function of the commandment in the covenant agreement? First, the commandment defines the parties in the covenant. In the covenant agreement, Yahweh was the liberating God. Israel was the liberated people. The covenant obviously was not a treaty between equals. It was more like a suzerain agreement where Yahweh, the more powerful party, will be the protector provider, while the people will be like the vassals obligated to obey the provisions stipulated in the covenant. The preamble of the covenant, secondly, which is found in the previous chapter, chapter 19, defines the purpose of the agreement. For loyalty and obedience to the terms of the covenant, Yahweh shall make a preferred nation out of them, a holy nation to serve as Yahweh's priests. Third, and more importantly, it defined the parties' obligations in the covenant relationship. Relative to Yahweh, the people will have no other gods. In Egypt and Canaan, there are many gods. Henceforth, Yahweh will be the only God to whom the people will pay loyalty and to render worship. The people, furthermore, were not to invoke the name of Yahweh in vain, not when making an oath or to curse or other misuses. In return, for loyalty and faithful worship, Yahweh will shower His people with the richest of blessings from the storehouse of the heavens. Relative to others, or neighbors, the people's obligation to each other includes familial concerns, children being respectful of parents, fifth commandment with promise for a long tenure in the promised land, abstaining from theft, murder, also bearing false testimony and adultery. While Yahweh initiated the covenant, the responsibility to uphold the covenantal obligations lies with the Israelites. In the larger scheme of things, the preamble of the covenant agreement also gave the Israelites a new identity. They have been traveling for 3 months and they have not been informed of Yahweh's intentions, why Yahweh wanted to liberate them from Egypt and settle them in a spacious land flowing with milk and honey. Now, with the agreement in place, they knew what Yahweh wanted to make out of them. They were to become Yahweh's treasured possession, a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. In the end, the commandments are not simply rules. It is Yahweh's tools in forming and nurturing a new community, a community quite different from what they had in Egypt. In the middle of the commandments, for example, is the provision for the Sabbath, a day of rest. Whereas in Egypt, all they had known all their lives was nothing but work, 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 and more oppressive work, the new community Yahweh is forming out of them will be different. They will have one day of rest for recreation, regeneration, and a time to be intimate with God in worship. On that day, even slaves and farm animals are not to work. Even as God rested on the seventh day of creation in the new community, everyone deserves a rest. It is equally interesting to note the location where Yahweh proposed the covenant. It happened in the desert. I hope it is not too much of a stretch for me to say. From what I'm hearing from fellow pastors, the church's inability to gather in person to worship due to the COVID-19 greatly aggravated the financial struggle of many local congregations. Many local congregations, including churches in our own denomination, are going through real trying times. In a virtual meeting of the conference, I heard one member said, with the shelter-in-place restriction, his church is struggling to find money to pay the salary of its staff. How then do we make meaning of journeying in the desert? Amy Erickson, the Associate Professor of Hebrew Bible in Iliff School of Theology in Denver, Colorado, In a reflection piece published for working preachers back in 2011, has this to say. She is hearing, quote, so much conversation that depict the mainline churches in the U.S. as dying, in part because it no longer enjoys a privileged place in society. Like the Israelites in the wilderness, I continue to quote, when churches don't have the money to pay the grocery or water bill, they sometimes long for the way things used to be, for the fabulous food in Egypt. After all, journeying through the wilderness can be terrifying. All the securities and apparent guarantees of survival are gone. But the wilderness could also provide the church with an opportunity to redefine itself according to what matters the most. End of quote. Our text today ended by saying, Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. God has come to test you so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning. Indeed, more than ever, our churches are undergoing the severest of tests, like being tested in the driest of desert. But perhaps testing is not a bad thing. As Erickson says, the crunch that the churches are going through may yet present an opportunity to redefine itself according to what matters most. The journey in the desert can perhaps help the churches examine itself and return to the most basic in a community of faith. A community's loyalties to God alone, not to a party or to a personality, and the respect and the care for others is paramount. Going through the desert may help us hear the voice of God more clearly. God's voice inviting us to live in covenant with God and with one another, and thus give birth to a renewed community of faith. Amen and amen.